So, picture this. For 300 years, a single family is in charge of Egypt. They build this incredible global center of knowledge, and they do it while tearing their own family apart to hold on to power. We're talking about the Ptolemies, and today we're going to unpack their incredible and kind of brutal 300 years story. Okay, so this is the paradox at the heart of it all. How on earth does one family manage to create the world's greatest library while their own family tree reads like the most twisted drama you can imagine? I mean, we're talking civil war, sibling rivalry, assassinations. How does that kind of genius just curdle into chaos? All right, so our story doesn't kick off with a birth. It kicks off with a death, a huge one. We're in 323 BC, and Alexander the Great, the guy who conquered most of the known world in less than a decade, just dies suddenly, and the empire he built is instantly thrown into total chaos. So yeah, Alexander's incredible run just comes to a screeching halt. And here's the problem. There's no clear heir. So what happens? His top generals, these hyper-ambitious guys, immediately start fighting over the pieces. This sparks decades of all-out war we now call the Wars of the Successors. Now, in the middle of all this chaos, one general, a really sharp guy named Ptolemy, makes an absolutely brilliant play. He grabs Egypt, which was by far the richest part of the empire. And to really cement his rule, he does something unbelievably bold. He basically hijacks Alexander's funeral procession and brings his body to Egypt. It was a genius PR move, forever linking his new dynasty to the legend of Alexander himself. Okay, so Ptolemy's got Egypt locked down. And the first three rulers of his dynasty, all named Ptolemy, by the way, don't just sit on their riches. They do something that is just mind-blowing. They use Egypt's massive wealth to build this incredible hub of culture, science, and trade. And the centerpiece of this whole vision? The city of Alexandria. I mean, they take this pretty new settlement and just explode it into the biggest, most important city in the Eastern Mediterranean. It becomes a true global metropolis, the envy of the entire ancient world. And you've got to understand, the scale of what they were doing was just off the charts. They don't just build a library, they build the great library, with the goal of having a copy of every book in the world. They create the museum, which you should think of it as the world's first real university, attracting geniuses like Euclid. And of course, they built the legendary Lighthouse of Pharos, a beacon for all the global trade that was making them insanely rich. But here's where their real genius shines through. It's not just about big buildings. See, they didn't just roll in and make everyone Greek. No, they were way smarter than that. They blended Greek and Egyptian cultures together, even presenting themselves as the new pharaohs. And the perfect example of this, you've probably heard of it, the Rosetta Stone, with its decrees written out for both their Greek and Egyptian subjects. And if you want a sense of just how good their engineers were, get this. The Lighthouse of Pharos stood around 110 meters tall. That's like a modern 30-story building. For centuries, it was one of the tallest man-made structures on the entire planet, and it stood for over 1,500 years. Just incredible. But you know how these things go. This golden age wasn't built to last. After those first three visionary kings, the fatal flaws of the dynasty really start to show. By the time we get to the fourth Ptolemy, things start to go downhill fast. The focus shifts from building a world-class civilization to just surviving the next family dinner. And I mean, the change is just night and day. You go from these visionary, capable rulers to a string of weak, corrupt kings who are more interested in luxury than in leadership. And you can see the results. Revolts start popping up, and they begin losing all the territory they'd gained overseas. The whole kingdom starts to fray at the edges. So what went wrong? Well, a big part of it goes back to a decision made by the second Ptolemy. He wanted to keep power and money all in the family, so he married his own full sister, Arsinoe. Now, this was an old pharaonic thing to do, but for the Ptolemies, it set this incredibly dangerous precedent of incest that would later fuel these absolutely brutal civil wars. And boy, did that precedent have consequences. The 2nd century BC is basically just one long, brutal family feud. We're talking queens marrying one brother, then going to war against him by marrying another brother. Mothers, daughters, uncles, everyone is fighting for the throne. It's an absolute mess of self-inflicted chaos, and it nearly bled the kingdom dry. So while the Ptolemies are busy literally trying to kill each other, another power is rising in the West, a huge one. And this new power is watching all this family drama and just waiting for its chance. We're talking about Rome, of course. After they finally crushed their arch-rival Carthage, the Roman Republic was basically the boss of the Western Mediterranean, and pretty soon their legions started looking east. And you can just watch Rome's influence creep closer and closer to Egypt on a map. They take Macedon, then Syria, and by 58 BC, they just straight up annexed Cyprus, which was Ptolemaic territory. The writing was on the wall. But here's the truly tragic part. The Ptolemies basically invited them in. You had these rival princes and princesses sailing to Rome, practically begging the Senate for soldiers and money to use against their own siblings. And every time they did that, they gave away another slice of their independence, until Egypt was a kingdom in name only. And that sets the stage for the last and by far the most famous Ptolemy of them all, Cleopatra VII. Her whole reign was this high-stakes tightrope walk, trying to play the Roman power brokers against each other just to keep her kingdom alive. Her first big move was to forge an alliance with the most powerful man on the planet, Julius Caesar. And you know the story, right? The legend is she had herself smuggled past her brother's guards, rolled up in a carpet, just to get a meeting with him. And guess what? It worked. Caesar's armies helped her defeat her brother and put her firmly on the throne. But then Caesar gets assassinated, and just like that, Cleopatra has to place another bet. This time she backs Mark Antony, Caesar's top general. Their plan was audacious. They were going to rule the entire eastern half of the Roman world, together, with Alexandria as their capital. It was a bold attempt to co-opt Roman power instead of just being crushed by it. But it was a gamble too far. Caesar's adopted son, the very clever and very ruthless Octavian, turns public opinion in Rome completely against them. It all comes to a head at the massive naval battle of Actium. They lose. Badly. A year later, with Octavian's army at the gates of her city, Cleopatra took her own life. And with Cleopatra's death, that's it. The Ptolemaic Dynasty is over. But it's even bigger than that. 3,000 years of pharaonic rule in Egypt. It all comes to an end. Egypt is now just a province, another piece of the Roman machine. But here's the thing. Even though the dynasty was gone, their legacy was powerful. Alexandria stayed the scientific and intellectual center of the world for centuries. The Romans loved the trade routes the Ptolemies had built, and their knowledge from that great library, it shaped history for the next 1,000 years. So that leaves us with the big question, right? How do we remember them? As brilliant patrons of science and culture, or as a tragic example of a family that just tore itself apart? Did their incredible achievements make up for their fatal flaws? That's the paradox of the Ptolemies, one of the most brilliant and self-destructive families in all of history.